the whole of the responding community. You know, if you're not comfortable coming home yet, don't come home.
I think that's why you're seeing the outrage in this country. People have had enough. The EPA is serving nothing but as a public relations arm to cover the asses of compromised elected officials and billion-dollar companies.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. We have George Thompson, who is a toxicologist with over 55 years of experience, actually came out of retirement because of this disaster. And he has spent God knows how many hours, analyzing the chemicals that were manufactured. He has called it, this could be the worst chemical disaster, not in American history, in world history. Also, Scott Smith, he is an independent tester, has been in Flint, has tested for air, soil, and water in East Palestine. I think you've been there well over 30 times. You've also been to Flint and many other places, and you've frankly been, smeared by the same officials that are on tape, contradicting themselves. Also joining us is Christina. You are a resident in Pennsylvania, right over the border, 6 miles from East Palestine. Don't think it's a secret. You are the voice on the recording we're about to play. You spoke with Mark Durno many times. Mark Durno is a top EPA official, which apparently is going to be leaving East Palestine shortly because he's been promoted. Ask yourself after this recording why he's been promoted. But you spoke with Mark Durno. You spoke with him and other officials many times. You've also been in the creeks showing over the last 21 months sheens of chemicals, the fact that there was still chemical contamination despite what the EPA, Norfolk Southern, was stating. Leslie has been fighting the fight. Government Accountability Project is outside the government, and they have been not only protecting whistleblowers in this story, but trying to get documents and transparency from the government. This audio, it's really illuminating to me, and I think most of you have heard it, how casual this EPA official is in saying things that the EPA has said the exact opposite. So let's start again. This is Christina and Mark's conversation from October.
Didn't you guys tell people that from the start that we had been exposed?
So we never said that you weren't, and that's, I'll say this to anybody that asks, and if you stick a reporter and a camera in my face, I'll say the same thing. We came back into town, right? And they smelled chemicals, right? Well, if you smell chemicals, then you're exposed to chemicals, right?
Yeah.
Even though they're well below our action levels, they're still there, and you're still exposed, right?
The statement that he made is very contradictory to what the administrator of EPA said at a town hall meeting in East Palestine when he and the governor of Ohio stated publicly in that town hall meeting that the area was safe and that the evacuation notice had been ended and they could come back. That saying you're not going to be exposed to chemicals, very different than what Mark Durno is inferring here when he with the statement that he made to Christina.
And Scott, you were there on the ground pretty early when he's saying, I wish we would have started the temporary relocation period about earlier, and they started it a month after. So earlier would be basically right away. Aren't you, is it a leap to infer that if he's saying we should have started it earlier, there was a health reason to start it earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just more of Mark Durno. This just goes to show the incompetence and arrogance across many government agencies. And this same playbook is playing out in Conyers, Georgia right now, where I'm involved in. For those watching Conyers, and Jordan, thank you. You're the only journalist, independent journalist, or anybody in journalism covering this in depth. And Mark Durno, his day is going to be coming in court. He is going to be held fully accountable. And I promise the world I'm going to live stream his depositions. The devastation that Mark Durno has done in community after community. And I know a lot more about him that's going to be coming out. And I've identified some other whistleblowers in the EPA that have a lot to say about Mr. Durno. And they're going to be talking to Leslie Pacey. So and then the double speak and the gaslighting it's just reprehensible. I don't even have words to describe just how Mr. Durno, I don't have the right words.
Their action level is for individual chemicals, meaning you're exposed to one chemical, not being exposed simultaneously to hundreds of chemicals at the same time.
Because that's trying to say that we can document that it's, quote, safe, when in fact they have totally ignored the unprecedented nature of this complex stew of chemicals that was simultaneously released by the fires. So there are perhaps 200 chemicals being released at the same time, and many of those chemicals produce the same effect. For example, some of the chemicals that I've identified, some of the cancer-causing chemicals that I've identified, there are perhaps 15 different chemicals that produce lung cancer. And whether one of those chemicals is below the action level or all of them are, but the synergistic effects of those is going to be above an action level, above a toxicity level. And I just heard yesterday in a webinar by the University of California in San Diego that they have documented that the real symptoms that the people in these exposures at East Palestine are suffering are from subcellular components being damaged by chemicals.
When I hear him say, Christina said, why didn't you tell us from the beginning we were exposed to potentially harmful chemicals? And he says, well, we never said you weren't. I mean, that just, to me, what does that say to you?
Look, we know they've been disingenuous. The EPA has been disingenuous from the beginning. They had a narrative they were following from the very beginning of this disaster. And another thing we're not talking about is that they didn't collect data, air quality data, for these residents in that first week. It was such a scant testing data. They did not send their aspect airplane out until after the plume. They knew they were going to create dioxins and phosgene. They knew they were.
That aspect airplane, for people that don't know, is state of the art. That's supposed to go out for these very circumstances to test for chemicals. Right. And they have a special chemical sensing technology. This is the EPA's airplane. They're supposed to send it out for emergencies within a few hours, and it took them 5 days to get there. Then they turned the chemical sensors off over the contaminated creeks. And this is something that came out in May with one of our whistleblowers, Robert Crowdell. So we dug deeper into all of that, and we really took a look at what they were doing the first week of the derailment. And there was really almost no ground monitoring. They increased it a little bit after that. So when he speaks about, when Mark Durno speaks about these levels being actionable levels, they're not really even collecting the data they should be collecting.
You know, when I saw on TV the CEO for Norfolk Southern come out and say the air is safe,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking to myself, well, that's not going to go over well. You never say that. What you say is you gotta be. People that don't understand our business, they don't realize that words matter, right? Mm-hmm. And if you know, and I don't know, I'd have to go back and listen to how our administrator characterized it, or how our people on the ground characterized it in those early days. But what I've got to believe that we said, and again, I have to go back and look, would have been, we're not seeing any levels above our action levels, right? Which is true. It was accurate. But the second piece to that is, I wish the whole of the responding community, us, local government, state government, Norfolk Southern, everybody would have said, listen, guys, if you're not comfortable coming home yet, don't come home. It's still,
Yeah.
these acrylate compounds
That's how I
stink.
think
They stink to high heaven, even though we're not
told
seeing them
people.
above our action levels. It still smells here.
Yeah.
And, you may be sensitive to those, those low-level chemicals or those odors, and
They're not protecting anybody. They're actually causing more damage than was necessary. If they'd taken a prudent approach and have the local people for miles around evacuate, that would have been the business of protection. But they didn't do that. And within days, and the reason I came out of retirement to study this as a toxicologist is when the EPA administrator himself, not just Norfolk Southern, but EPA came out and said, this is safe. And the governor of Ohio had a drink of their water and said, see, I'll show you this is safe. I have confidence in our scientists. But that event occurred so quickly after the derailment and fires that there wasn't time for them to generate data to underscore the statements they were making. They were making those statements with no data.
I think that's why you're seeing the outrage in this country. People have had enough, and it's the EPA is serving nothing but as a public relations arm to cover the asses of compromised elected officials and billion-dollar companies. And people in the EPA, as you know, I've been subpoenaed in my driveway with ex-EPA attorney Davina Pajara. These government people that work for government agencies are selling these communities, these victims in these communities, and all of us taxpayers out to enrich themselves. It's all about their personal profits over people. It's that simple. It's going on and on and on. And you literally need to completely tear apart the EPA and start from scratch if it's ever going to work. And to put it into context, you got 17,000 employees and a $12 billion budget. Where is in that money? I won't even get started on where a lot of that money is going. Grants to nonprofits like Mom's Clean Air Force to shut down the free speech and the people in East Palestine. It goes on and on and on.
And Christina, did I miss something? Because Mark Durno was on the ground in East Palestine. To his credit, he met with residents. He did, events. I have never heard him speak this way in public. He never said in public that I'm aware of, wow, when I heard Alan Shaw, the Norfolk Southern CEO, go on TV and say everything's dandy, everything's fine, I basically said, holy shit. I mean, he didn't say that to you, but I'm paraphrasing. That's basically what he's saying. Like, I couldn't believe he said that. If he felt that way privately, and he is not the janitor at the EPA, no offense to janitors, he was their go-to guy on the ground responding to this. He was the liaison for the EPA to the community. Isn't it on the EPA then to publicly say, well, we got to disagree with Norfolk Southern here. There's still a lot that we need to look at, and we can't say for certain it's safe, and residents need to exercise caution.
Yeah, I think that they had a responsibility to say something for us, and instead it seemed like they spoke up for the corporation instead. I've talked to Mark about that since then, and had said about how they're a agency that's meant to service us, and they're public servants. So they should be giving us the truth about what is going on with us.
Right.
And I think that with this, it's sort of like the first time that somebody from their agency has actually said that.
Right.
Things wrong.
That's something you need to put on the front page. I don't know if they're going to cover this. I doubt it, because for some reason, the mainstream media, I don't know if it has to do with Norfolk Southern and pressure they're getting from the billion-dollar railroad company. I don't know if it's pressure they're getting from the EPA, but it's like out of sight, out of mind. And other than the initial explosion, They don't seem to be able to keep their attention wrapped around that people have cancer in this area. People are having strokes, seizures. Colin, let's just play one or two of those clips, and then we'll get back to this. Go back for another scan soon after that?
April of that year. That's when he fell. And he thought he had broke a rib.
Yeah.
And
All people fall.
showed nothing.
Showed nothing 2 months after the derailment detonation. And then you started feeling not so good?
I noticed a lump when I was taking a shower. The first time, it was on the right side. The first time I blew it off, I thought, yes. But my next shower, it got bigger fairly quickly. And I said, no, this is not right. So I went downstairs and told my wife, I said, would you take a look at this and tell me what you think? She said, yeah, I think you need to go to the doctor. And I did.
Yeah.
And I did. I went to our family doctor.
And this was in May of 2023?
The end of May.
End of May, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about 3 months after they exploded these chemicals?
18
18 weeks after they unnecessarily blew them cars up.
Yeah.
We all know that now. We kind of knew it then,
Right.
but nobody would listen. But anyway, but yes.
End of May, and he diagnoses you with?
I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Technically, anyone can get cancer, but people are mysteriously getting rare forms of cancer that they don't have any family history for. There's been other people with seizures, strokes. I just had an alarming encounter, Colin, I don't know if you have this clip, where we're finding out young children are entering puberty very prematurely, including girls as young as 7 or 8.
We have kids that are going through puberty issues with hormones. They're getting acne at age 6.
And the puberty issues are coming years before puberty would normally start?
I'm not a doctor. Keep that straight. I'm not a doctor. I've talked to people. I do know from having a family member that did go through early puberty. Now, it is very uncommon for a whole town and surrounding areas to have kids around the age 6, 7, and 8 to have hormones to produce puberty.
You mentioned your 8-year-old daughter is now developing puberty in terms of her a cycle, or?
She's had multiple. We actually just went to a doctor about a month ago or so. She actually had got an injection. She has to get every 3 months for a while just to pause it.
The thing to remember is that this release went into the air, which means that you were inhaling it. It's the fastest way to get chemicals into your body and into the organ system because it goes into the lungs and right into the bloodstream and starts getting distributed immediately. If you eat it or you're exposed through the skin, then there's a delay and reduced exposure. But when you inhale it, it's coming straight in. And I talked to one fellow just a week ago that when they detonated the vinyl chloride on the 6th of February, the plume went in the air and plateaued at about 3,000 feet. But he lives in an elevated area near East Palestine, and the plume came directly to the ground where he was. So he was that high up. And he said that the black cloud covered all of his apple trees and made the trees and the apples black. So this soot and ash was deposited on them. And he said he just let the apples go in years past so the deer could eat them. But the deer wouldn't eat the black apples. Wow. And he was overcome so quickly that he had to call his daughter, and she came and rescued him and took him away from the farm where he was living. But he said that the plume was so thick that he couldn't see his barn, which was not more than 200 feet away. And so the kinds of exposures, none of this has been presented to the public by the ones that are supposedly protecting the public.
So why would it make sense to keep people in a place that could kill them in 5 years? And if they want to be even based on trauma, You know the trauma was from the derailment.
Well, that's
So
one of the
they should be
reasons.
able to move.
That's one of the reasons we put both the health monitoring and the mental health services into our
And I
into our
don't think
settlement.
that the moving part should be on us.
Yeah.
It should be on Norfolk Southern. If we feel we need to move,
Yeah.
then they should have to pay for it.
Yeah. I understand.
Frankly, I'm sure there's more that's going to come out. I am pretty sure there's more that's going to come out, whether it's from me or other people. But I think we also need to establish here, listen, we do not want, and this is to everyone watching right now, we don't want another period like 2017 to 2020 where everything else gets buried in the 24/7 Trump circus. I don't care if you like Trump or hate Trump or love him, but we know the media seems to have a problem where they can't cover anything but Donald Trump. This is very important. This is a life or death matter for thousands of people. It might not be death right away, but it could be death in 2 years. It could be death in 4 years. So we need to get the media to give a damn about this.
You're becoming the standard, along with a few others, in real journalism. The media that we call mainstream are corrupted PR people at this point. They're not media, and I do think that they're dying. But the point is why I'm positive, millions of people are going to come together. And it starts with what I'm seeing from East Palestine to Conyers. People are taking back their power in their own hands. And what we've learned here is I'm seeing some real traction with community groups coming together. And that's the only way we're going to be able to move forward, with whistleblowers working with independent journalists like yourself and Government Accountability Project. And I want to say, because I know a lot of people from Conyers are probably watching this, and I know Christina and Chrissy and so many others from East Palestine, get into that courtroom and start representing yourselves and demand a meeting with the judge and listen to the people from East Palestine, because you can stop the corruption.